Testimony at this week's Madlanga Commission of Inquiry make the Ekurhuleni municipality look like one hell of a crime scene where upstanding citizens and good civil servants have been harassed, victimized and even assaulted for just wanting to do the right thing. Unruly, rogue and criminal are just some of the words used to describe senior members within the Ekurhuleni Metro Police Department. And at the center is of what sounded like an epic scandal is one Brigadier Julius Mkhwanazi, who's been described as a law unto himself, acting with impunity and absolutely no consequences. We'll speak to investigative journalist Jeff Wicks about how the installation of blue lights into the private vehicles of Vusumuzi Cat Matlala as if they were municipal cars. It's his media inquiry that set off a chain of events. And speaking of Matlala, I speak to a professor from UNISA School of Criminal Justice about how safe Matlala is as he is currently being kept at the Hoshimampuru Correctional Center. It's Matlala's evidence that has the potential to implicate even more people in some of the highest echelons of our political and criminal justice system. I'm Ziyanda Ngcobo, and this is a weekly take of the events at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. Let's start off with Friday's testimony because there was a witness D who gave evidence remotely and off camera. He told commissioners he was not only an accessory to a murder, but also alleged that suspended EMPD Deputy Chief Brigadier Julius Mkhwanazi was also part of it. From civilians posing as cops, the disposing of a body in a river, right through to a blue light hijacking group that has been wreaking havoc in the province, Witness D explains how a robbery suspect was murdered.
I noticed behind Pretoria the suspect with a plastic bag with the two SAPS Brockpan members assisting him from the right-hand side of the double bed. Tubing is where a plastic bag gets placed over a person's head, and that person gets suffocated to the point that he talks or cannot breathe, no longer breathe, and then obviously that we will, or they would obviously then ask him to talk to us, obviously to avoid this from taking place again. I entered the room and sat next to the suspect on the left-hand side of the bed. When Andre stopped, I asked the suspect to tell me where the stolen stock was being kept. The suspect replied that he will show us. I picked up a wooden table leg that was broken from inside the room, held his legs down with it as to not touch him with my hands as he was wet. Andre then continued tubing in with the one unknown Brockman SAPS member, helping to hold him down, while the other was searching the drawers, etc. I got up and left the room. The other people were still searching the room. It was quite clear, or the house, my apologies, commissioners. It was quite clear at this stage that the stock from a warehouse robbery was not in the house. As I entered the passage towards the kitchen, I saw one EMPD officer taking a bucket of water to the room where the suspect was being kept.
So even more shockingly was not only how there were EMPD officials, but others from the South African Police Service.
In the kitchen, I found Ekurhuleni stalls searching the cupboards. I walked out of the house and stood on the steps. A short while later, I walked back into the kitchen and found Ekurhuleni on her phone. She ended the call and shouted for everyone to move outside into the yard and went towards the second bedroom. As I moved towards the door, I noticed two unknown Brockman SAPS members leaving the house in haste. One of them was carrying a small black sports bag. I exited the house. I was joined outside in the garden next to the truck by Kobus and the others. Shortly after this, Andre and Ekurhuleni joined us. I asked whether a suspect talked, and Andre responded that he will never ever talk again.
Witness D then explains how he felt compelled to follow through with Mkhwanazi's instruction to dispose of the body, otherwise he was going to be next.
When you saw the body tubing taking place, can you confirm that the suspect was alive at that stage?
Commissioner, I'm at paragraph 14. I can confirm when I left the room,
Yes.
the deceased was still alive.
And then the next time you saw him, we are now later in your statement, he was already dead and you were being given instruction to dispose of the body. Witness D?
It's gonna be
Witness D.
paragraph 27. I saw Ziyanda Ngcobo and Deandre load the deceased. That's the first time that I saw him after the room, where they load the deceased onto my bakkie.
He then went on to say that on their way to dump the body, he also felt compelled to share his live location with his wife and instructed her that should she not hear from him in the next hour, she should call the police. Now, the following day, they went back to the location, and when they got there, they found SAP's vehicles where the body was found. But assurances came not to stress because the chief would handle it.
I followed Mackenzie all the way to Spaarwater Pan, just outside Nigel, where Mackenzie instructed me to dump the body of the suspect. I did as instructed and placed the deceased body's legs first into the water and let the rest of the body rest on the banks of the dam. I got back into my vehicle and drove towards the R23. At the R23 and R550 intersection, I received a call from a number I did not recognize. When I answered the call, I realized it was Constable XTN phoning me. She asked me if it's done, to which I replied yes.
Absolutely shocking stuff. And earlier in the week, there was testimony from retired Ekurhuleni Metro Police Department Deputy Commissioner Refusal, who also spoke about a similar level of criminality. Now, he was the head of auxiliary and support services, and he told the inquiry about the existence of a rogue unit that operated under the command of Julius Mkhwanazi. He says these were EMPD officers that were operating outside their jurisdiction, committing crimes under the cover of the badge against unsuspecting civilians.
In terms of the South African Police Services Act, Section 64, we as Metro Police is established and we have a specific mandate, which is traffic enforcement, bylaw enforcement and crime prevention. That's the main mandate. But we are further also restricted to our area of jurisdiction to the local government that has appointed us. Except there's a clause that also allows us, if there's collaboration agreements or there's agreements with other cities, that we can extend upon request to those areas. But a large portion of what these groups did is that they were actually operating rogue. They would hear a rumor here or information here, and they will go and do law enforcement, arrest people in Hammanskraal. They will go to KZN. They will go to Free State. They will actually arrest, and it will all be good successes according to them because there's arrest in that. But they acted completely out of scope. They do criminal investigations, which is the sole capability of the South African Police Service. They have no powers to do criminal investigations at all, but they were doing it.
From truck hijackings to stealing precious stones, all the way to stealing copper, this rogue unit seemed to be unstoppable.
It is a really bad situation where what they explained is that there's a group of officers within the Specialized Services section that works directly under Dion Singh, who's now been promoted to a brigadier last year by Mkhwanazi, and Mkhwanazi running the scene. There's officers that is in that team that they operate on a modus operandi where there would be truck hijackings, and then this group will always find the horse, the front of the truck. They will find the horse back and it will be a very good success, but the freight or the load and the trailer will always be missing. And he then went through that list to say, but there's a modus operandi where a group of police officers will then take the load and offer it back to the owner via burner phones, and they will actually offer this back and then get paid, and then the owner will receive a PIN and he will get his load and things back.
The theft of precious stones from a legitimate seller by these crooked EMPD officials could result in the Metro now having to pay tens of millions of rands in damages. Spies explains why.
In the Hillbrow, Kensington, Johannesburg area. But this is followed up. At that moment in time, it was just informed from Mr. Makagula that this incident took place. We call it just the precious stones. But at a later stage, we received a notification from a lawyer firm that they intend to sue the city in a civil claim for the loss of this. And everything that Mr. Makagula told us is contained in this claim against the city for the loss of this. I think it is 45 million rand that was stolen. This is one of the matters where the chief of police took this claim and he went to the city manager. And this has been reported to the chief, to me. When he took it to the city manager to say to her, here's a civil claim where the same group of officers are involved again, the city manager made it off as if the chief of police is directly going after Brigadier Mkhwanazi. And she lambasted him. That's what he informed me. She lambasted him, and we should step out of this matter and not get involved into it at all.
Spies told the commissioners that when he tried to report the conduct of Mkhwanazi in relation to the blue lights scandal to IPID, more skeletons came tumbling out. To the surprise of Spies, it turned out that there was an entire cohort of EMPD officials that the police watchdog was looking into. As more details were laid bare, it became clear that the deputy chief was overseeing a rogue unit that was committing crimes.
After we presented our case of what we have, Inspector, or I say now Inspector, but I don't know his real title, Mr. Makagula, who's the investigator for IPID, he started to tell us of, but they are already investigating the same group of officers. And we're like, what group of officers? And he mentioned their names then, and all the crimes that is there. Now, at this meeting, I took notes of that. And my notes, as I keep the notes, my notes is in my statement as well, and we'll get most probably now to my notes. But as I took the notes, it's what they're saying to me. So it's not that I have the real facts at that moment. I just took notes of it. And it just became worse and worse because they were mentioning cobalt theft. They were mentioning murder, that these officers. And we're like, what officers? We are speaking here about one officer who is committing a crime. And now suddenly you make it as if it's a whole group of officers that is busy there.
Now, Mkhwanazi and his unruly colleagues were apparently so ungovernable that when the municipality took a decision to vet the 3,000-strong EMPD workforce, they refused to have their fingerprints taken. And once again, no disciplinary action was taken against them.
I had a subsection within me called the warrant of arrest section. That warrant of arrest section was headed by a Colonel Foster, and I tasked him and his whole team to immediately start the process on 1 January, taking my division's fingerprints. That was concluded in January already, the whole division of auxiliary and support services. I then made him available to the other divisions to say, please assist the other divisions because they take too long to do this process. And by the end of February, which the chief's deadline was, a large portion of it was concluded except the southern region and the specialized services. Specialized services refused to have their fingerprints taken at all. This section is the section that resorts under then Brigadier Mkhwanazi.
Spies testified that when Mkhwanazi was promoted to the rank of a deputy chief in December 2023, he did not have the requisite top security clearance. This was because of his refusal to be vetted on more than one occasion.
By the time you left, had any vetting at all, the annual vetting that was contemplated, had it happened or was it happening at all?
No further. That 376 that we have vetted from inside the department, that was the only vetting that was done, and then the process to carry on from that was physically stopped, and thereafter no vetting was again done on criminal records. There is a later process where just after Commissioner, when Mkhwanazi was appointed as a deputy chief, then, and this vetting process was started, there was an instruction from the chief of police to the 3 deputy chiefs that we must be fully vetted. In that process, He again refused to be vetted at all, and Commissioner Ngcobo, forms were supplied to him, and he started the process to be vetted. And I answered the chief back to say, I'm already vetted to a top secret clearance level. Here is my top secret clearance security number.
Then the inquiry was told, and listen to this, about how almost a tenth of the Metro Police's force of over 300 members have criminal convictions.
The Ekurhuleni HR systems, computer systems, for instance, doesn't have access to Home Affairs, Harness, or the African Police. There's no interface between these systems. So my officer can physically go to Durban on holiday, and he can commit a rape, he can commit a robbery, he can commit anything wrong there. We will never know it happened. The officer can come back, and every time he has to appear in court, he takes a day's leave and he fly out, and we will only discover it if he doesn't pitch for work one day because he sits in prison. And we have there's even a strange anomaly that happened now. One of our officers was found guilty of murder. He actually, at Vosloorus police station, he shot and killed his wife, who was a captain in the police. And then he tried to commit suicide, and he shot himself in the head. He was paramedics on scene, rescued. He actually looks like he sustained no damage, and he was released from hospital. He was eventually found guilty, and he was incarcerated, and I believe it was like a period of 15 years. He came out on parole now in this year, and he lodged an unfair dismissal case because he wasn't processed in the correct manner, and Ekurhuleni reinstated him.
It's also worth noting that some of these convictions were from as far back as the 80s and 90s. So one wonders how these people would have gotten appointed to serve at the EMPD. All right, let's take a quick breather, because after this, I will unpack the 3-day testimony of former Ekurhuleni Head of Employee Relations, Xolani Ngciza. He has shared how if it had not been for a media inquiry from News 24's Jeff Wicks, they would have been none the wiser about the criminality happening right under their noses. Wicks will be joining us in a moment. You don't want to miss that conversation. Welcome back. We're still unpacking the testimony about the drama involving the blue lights being fitted into cars belonging to Vusumuzi Cat Matlala security company, Cat VIP Services. Now, when the Ekurhuleni Metro's former head of employee relations, Xolani Ngciza, took the stand, he unpacked how the so-called official letter confirming the relationship between Matlala's entity and the municipality was not only unlawful, but was also vaguely written. Ngciza says apart from this letter being illegal, it was also not signed off on by the right people.
For whose consumption again was this intended? I see there's no specific addressee. It says to whom it may concern.
That is another a worrying factor, Mr. Commissioner, Mr. Chair, because when you address an official letter, you address a letter to a specific individual or entity. This is addressed to whom it may concern. So the bearer of this letter can then claim that I am the whom it may concern. And therefore, note that I have this relationship with this state entity, and my actions are covered under this letter.
Ngciza says to this day, it's unclear what these vehicles were being used for, and that the open-endedness of the letter meant that they could be used for nefarious purposes. This, he adds, was particularly concerning since this was in 2021 during the peak of the COVID-19 pandemic.
It's just too wide, and it has potential to create serious problems. We don't know, even up to today, who actually then had this letter and what did they do with it. No, I have not come across any information that says the people that got this letter, if it was Cat VIP people, what did they do with this letter? And that's a scary thought, that a letter of the municipality can be in the hands of individuals, so that even if they get into a roadblock, even if they get into all sorts of other situations, they will not be checked. They'll just simply say, but we are in a relationship with the MPD. You can't touch us.
Throughout the week, testimonies from Ngciza and another official, an EMPD spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Ekurhuleni Metro, detailed how their attempt to follow up on the blue lights matter resulted in them having key functions from their departments taken away from them.
Before I dealt with the Julius Mkhwanazi debacle, I raised some pertinent issues with the city manager. As you can see on page 320, I started off by saying, to take away what constitutes close to 50% of the operational obligations of a unit is to render that unit redundant. The following questions are thus pertinent. One, what informed these changes? What thought process has been put in place on the implications of the operational implications of the changes so put? Given the fact that the changes are with immediate effect, what about the processes that were put in place but said cases had not commenced? Should the dockets or files of these matters be redirected to the HODCLS and HODHR as per the immediacy of the processes that are now put in place by the memorandum? Should the answer to 3 supra be in the negative, what defense should the employer representatives and presiding officers advance to the unions when they are challenged on their appointment and thus jurisdiction of the disciplinary hearing?
In the case of Tipa, she was even told to back off when she tried to respond to a media inquiry from News 24's Jeff Wicks. The MPD's head of media and public relations unit also tried to alert police watchdog IPID. Tipa says her attempts to coordinate the Metro's response to the blue lights scandal were met with resistance.
What was your motivation for proposing a joint statement between EMPD and the Office of the City Manager?
Above anything else, it would be that which would be conflicting statements coming out from the same institution, dealing with the same matter, but yet there would be conflict with the statement. And that, again, the questions were rather technical and required further engagement with other departments that I wouldn't be able to acquire, and that the Office of the City Manager would be better placed. And above all, again, the seriousness of the issue also warranted a response to handle any further inquiry.
Thank you, Colonel. What then was the response to your proposal?
I was told to back off. I was told to back off and allow the Office of the City Manager to handle further media inquiries.
And who told you to back off?
I was informed by the spokesperson for the city of Ekurhuleni, Mr. Ziyanda.
So Ngciza was categorical about the debt of gratitude owed to News 24's investigative journalist Jeff Wicks for sounding the alarm bells around the blue light saga involving Madlanga. In fact, he says, had it not been for Wicks's inquiry, the municipality would have been none the wiser, and whatever activities these vehicles were involved in would have continued. In fact, let's bring in Jeff Wicks from News 24. Thanks for joining us this evening on Newzroom Afrika, channel 405. I mean, Jeff, who would have thought that that one media inquiry, both you and the officials could have never anticipated the chain of events that were set off? How did you come to know about this?
Thank you for having me, Ziyanda. I think Vusi Muzi Matlala was a focal point for us in our investigation into Babita Deokaran's murder and the extraction syndicates which were operating at Tembisa Hospital. At least that's where we found him. Babita Deokaran was in essence the first person to put Kat Matlala on anyone's radar. She certainly alerted us to him, and we decided to give him the attention that he deserved. And whilst we were sort of figuring his place in extraction syndicates at Tembisa, our sources came to us with this memorandum of understanding, and when I first looked at it, the red flags jumped out at me because what it looked like was that CAT VIP and its agents, specifically Matlala, were giving preferential treatment from a law enforcement agency and sort of lent credence to claims that he had unfettered access to those in positions of influence, both in the EMPD and in the SAPS. And I think it's quite, prescient now that a single email that I sent off in 2023 is now a focal point of the Madlanga Commission. But I think the take home for me specifically is the damage wrought by that email. And that's really a story of capture. And I, personally feel guilty because I've listened to the testimony of Spies and Tepa and all of the other officials who, had their lives torn apart just for acting on my inquiry. And whilst I'm glad that Mr. Matlala was stripped of that privilege that he definitely didn't deserve, this is the true cost of state capture, and it's a human cost.
Absolutely. And I mean, Jeff, do we at this stage or during the course of your investigation, were you able to figure out what these vehicles under CAT VIP services, what activities they were involved in?
So it's certainly nothing to what Mr. Ngcobo spoke to about the unknown criminal activity, but from the evidence that we found that they were not used for any sort of official purpose. And we called on Kat Matlala's then wife, Cordelia Kibeng's Instagram page, because she was very flagrant about what she posted. And she was brazen. She posted, videos of her traveling in blue light convoys to go on private airport charters and take her so-called cubs to school because her moniker was Mama Cat. And, I think that's critical and makes an obvious value case for not only investigative journalism, but journalism. And the fact that one email can set in motion this chain of events is quite remarkable.
One of the key things for me, Jeff, this week at the inquiry has been how the name of Dr. Imogen Mashazi, the now retired Ekurhuleni city manager, is a central theme throughout the testimonies when you talk about the bullying, the harassment, and the relenting, protection of Brigadier Julius Mkhwanazi. In your probe, were you able to figure out why is this the case? Is there a direct link between Mashazi and Vusimuzi Kat Matlala, for an example?
Not that we were ever able to pick up, but, on our assessment of the facts at our disposal then and now, it is clear that Mkhwanazi had the political protection of Mashazi. It's clear not only from the testimony, but what we've heard from our sources before is that Mkhwanazi had special game status and he was allowed to do as he wished, and anyone who acted against him was essentially purged. And, these are the victims in this drama. Tepa and Spies and Mapia, anyone who tried to do the right thing and act against what is clear and flagrant corruption and also undue influence that Kat Matlala had over Mkhwanazi. Anyone who acted against him was met with the sword. And that's problematic because it tells us that capture has not ended in our country. It tells us that capture endures in our institutions and in our municipalities, specifically within Ekurhuleni. And it points to dysfunction not only in law enforcement, but in the executive management of that municipality, because it's clear to me, at least, that Mashazi was serving an agenda. What exactly that agenda was remains to be seen.
Speaking of agendas, last one from me, Jeff. I mean, one thing that was glaring for me was, the irregularities in the letters where there's someone, the designation is wrong and it's given to the wrong person, not the right people are signing off on documents. Are we dealing with a case of gross incompetence, corruption, or perhaps both?
Well, I think it's flagrant and it's simply lazy. I think that letter was written with an understanding that it would be a free pass to anyone who bore it. And I think very little effort went into actually crafting it because it really didn't matter. It was the cover that Mr. Matlala needed, who, by virtue of his felonious profile, could have used those blue lights for whatever he wished. And we know that he abused them. He was never entitled to them to begin with. But again, on the part of Mkhwanazi, this is just one issue in a raft of complaints against him, not least the most serious. And what needs to happen from this point on is accountability, because what that email should have spawned was disciplinary action for Mkhwanazi and him being rinsed from the police service if he was guilty. that we didn't see. We saw, in fact, everyone who went after him being pushed out of their posts. Now is the time for action and accountability.
Yep. News 24's investigative journalist, Jeff Wicks, thank you for your time tonight. Feeling guilty about actually trying to get the truth. Let's take another short break, because after it, we'll zone in on what security measures have been put in place to ensure Vusumuzi Matlala's safety as he remains behind bars. The who, what, when and how are likely to make for an interesting listen. Stay tuned. Thanks for staying tuned to the wrap of this week's testimonies at the Madlanga Commission. So Ngcobo continued with his 3-day testimony, where on Thursday he played video footage of Mkhwanazi and Mashazi at a Christmas party at the end of 2023. This would have been the same year that Mkhwanazi was supposed to have faced disciplinary action, but was instead promoted to being a brigadier, which is the ranking of a deputy chief within the Metro Police Department. Now, in the clip, Mkhwanazi is heard expressing how he would die for the former city manager.
We will die for you. We will take a bullet for you.
Thank you so much.
Yes.
DJ, you want to
The commissioners then asked Ngcobo for his interpretation of what he believes was the intention behind how Mkhwanazi expressed himself.
Mkhwanazi gets promoted. A few weeks thereafter, there is this. Mkhwanazi then expresses his gratitude, his loyalty, and all sorts of things to say, you know what, I will die for you. Because you are my mother. You have not only secured my continued employment in the municipality, but you've also advanced me against all odds, against all processes of the municipality. In fact, we've even gone to change processes that have been there, processes that have stood the test of time. Just like that, they've been changed because you protect me, you are my mother. The affinity that exists between you and I is to the extent that I would take a bullet for you. And I don't take this to be I'll take a bullet for you in the ordinary sense of a VIP protector, protecting their principal. But I take this statement to be a statement that is issued by a person who truly believes in the relationship that they have with the other person. And therefore, I would go to the ends of the world for you. Because I am where I am and who I am because of you, my mother.
So let's chat to Professor Ephraim Kevin Sbanyoni from the School of Justice at the University of South Africa to talk more about the man at the center of most of the testimonies we've heard so far, Vusumuzi Matlala. Thank you for your time, Professor Sbanyoni. I mean, week after week, we keep hearing about Vusumuzi Matlala at ad hoc, Madlanga Commission, even all the way to Tembisa Hospital scandal. But when someone someone is a witness and they're incarcerated, protecting them becomes that much more difficult. In fact, the ad hoc committee, which is another process in Parliament, is contemplating how to get, Matlala's testimony. According to your, expert advice, how should the Madlanga Commission, what options do they have, essentially, insofar as how they can obtain Matlala's testimony?
Thank you so much, Ziyanda. Good afternoon to the viewers as well. That is a pivotal question. I mean, first of all, we applaud the Madlanga Commission and, of course, the ad hoc committee. They are fit for the purpose, and I have no doubt in my mind that they are doing a sterling job. Now, coming to your questions, there are various ways to obtain his testimony. Mainly, as we have seen, that he might possesses some risk in terms of him evading or have a flight risk element attached to him going to the Madlanga Commission or to going to Cape Town. So what they can exploit is to go to Kgosi Mampuru, where he's housed, to get his testimony. And I believe that the Kgosi Mampuru has enough space. I was told there is a court there, as a court setting of some sort there as well, that they can utilize to source information from him, because I believe that the ad hoc committee has powers to reach out, because it's not a parliament of people if it cannot arrive at a just and arrive at a conclusion that we needed to close these allegations.
But Prof. Sibanyoni, I mean, I think one of the pivotal things on the top of South Africans' minds is how safe is Kat Matlala himself? In other words, we know of stories of people being murdered in prison. How easy would it be to get to him, in a way, especially because we are dealing with very unique allegations of infiltration of criminal networks, mafias, into the criminal justice system, which also includes the Correctional Services Department.
Yeah, remember, Kat Matlala is not sentenced yet. And as much as he is at CIMEX, where he's in a single cell for safety custody purposes, reaching to him, it might be somewhat impossible, not unless the infiltration, it is that deep. I mean, people are not sentenced yet. They get their own food. They are liable to visiting, and the head of prison, according to section 111, section 30, is able to visit that person once a day. And of course, the social work and the people responsible for him 4 times in a day. So I can say that as a pivotal witness, of course, all eyes are on him. And if anything were to happen to him, then we have another thing coming. So they will make it to the point that he is safe as he's not in communal cells with the other inmates, that might pose a threat to him. Hence, they moved him to a single cell holdings for specifically those reasons, because witnesses incarcerated, they do not have the same rights as the witnesses that are in the communities, and I believe that him being at the CIMEX, he is protected, so to speak.
But then in what way do we ensure, and when I say we, perhaps I should rather say the Correctional Services facility, in this instance, the Kgosi Mampuru facility, ensure that in its attempt to protect the incarcerated witness, that it's not a form of a punitive measure through isolation. You've already mentioned that he's at a C-max and he's not been sentenced yet. So what measures do they need to put in place to actually balance this out? Because there is regulation around this.
Yeah, look, unfortunately, the segregation is impunitive in its format, and unfortunately, that it is a way of keeping him safe. And we know that segregation, it's not a way, amongst others, to keep the inmates safe. However, we don't have a framework for the processes thereof. We don't have even the Witness Protection Act. It is very silent in terms of incarcerated inmates and the processes thereof to protect them, except to subject them to segregation. And it pains me to say that it's not one of the ways to actually protect, because of in isolation, things are happening. The psychological harm, the stigma, reduce access to programs that are due to him. So, yeah.
All right, that's UNISA's Prof. Ephraim Kevin Sibanyoni. He's at the School of Criminal Justice at UNISA. Thank you for your time. We're reflecting on just how safe is Vusimuzi Kat Matlala as he's currently being held at the Hoshimampuru Correctional Facility. All right, we'll take another quick break, but after the break, we will hear more harrowing testimony, this time from the EMPD's head of media and public relations unit, Lieutenant Colonel Ekurhuleni Metro. She broke down on more than one occasion on the stand, and this is the cost of wanting to tell the truth. Thanks for staying with Newzroom Afrika, channel 405, and making us your station of choice. Now, on Friday, a deeply moving and harrowing testimony was made from EMPD spokesperson, Lieutenant Colonel Ekurhuleni Metro. Tipa says she never thought her following up on the media inquiry around the Blue Light saga would result in her being assaulted, intimidated, and eventually having the functions under her role taken away from her. Now, the head of the EMPD Media and Public Relations Unit broke down on the stand when sharing how she was attacked after returning from her mother's gravesite.
I was sitting with a neighbor who was on the passenger seat, and 3 men came up to the vehicle that I was in. They came there. The one that came around to the driver's seat cocked a firearm and pointed it to me. I had the windows down, and he then demanded that I switch off the vehicle. So he puts his hand in to try and reach for the keys on the ignition, but it's not the kind that you start manually with the key, it's those press buttons. And there was a lot of things that was being said. Behind me, as I was on the driver's seat, another came in, and there was this sharp metal object against my neck. Initially, I thought, yes, a knife that's going to slit my throat, only to discover that that is a firearm. And that, I think what hurt me the most with everything that was said at that point, it was then, it is things that are work-related. And the fact that, they want a phone from me, and the information which they want, and the fact that they would be, sorry, commissioners. I was hit on the head with a firearm. the accosters shoved me to the side of the passenger seat. They got into the car and they drove off. They drove past my house, and I could see my neighbor who's literally looking inside the vehicle to identify who the drivers are.
It's worth noting that that wasn't the only attack that Tipa faced. In fact, there was another one, and she couldn't actually conclude her testimony in this regard. But in the days leading up to the first time she was assaulted, she says she had been followed by a suspicious vehicle.
I remember this one time, Commissioner, that prior to my attack, I had a vehicle, a grey Audi, that was following me for some time. I further informed Commissioner Spies. Now it seemed like because of this blue light blazer saga that everybody's just crumbling. This vehicle that is subsequently following me, I sent him the registration. He conducts a vehicle inquiry on it, and it is discovered to be linked to somebody by the surname of Mkhwanazi. That's not even coming from the region or area of Ekurhuleni, but instead it is a Pretoria-based address. So that alone, I think just putting the dots together says a lot. Maybe it is Ibongo Fanani and nothing beyond that.
Tipa relayed a strange incident where an EMPD officer who has a child with Brigadier Julius Mkhwanazi was curious to find out whether she had made it to work the Monday after the attack. She says she found this unsettling and believes it was linked to the assault a few days prior.
So it was still within the weekend of my incident. She then informs me that a lady came looking for you here, Nomapa. Nomapa, why would Nomapa look for me? Commissioners, it should be noted that this Nomapa is a lady that had a relationship with Brigadier Mkhwanazi, and they also share a child together. As to reasons why Nomapa would look for me in an office that we do not even operate from the same division, we are not even related in any way coming to work stuff. So that truly puzzled me. It truly, truly puzzled me.
She works for the EMPD as well?
She is an EMPD officer.
And Tipa had this parting shot when asked about the impact that one media inquiry had on her life after everything took a sharp turn.
This has been a platform for the world to know and understand the criminality that goes into an institution of that nature, and what people must be subjected to, and how the animal farm then would dictate that all animals are equal, but some are more equal than others. That used to be the favorite saying of the city manager. She would say it laughing. I never understood then, but I know now, and I know better. I'd fallen victim to them a few times. I don't even know what my fate is moving away from this, but I'll take it as it comes. There's no way.
So that's all I have time for in this week's roundup of testimony at the Madlanga Commission of Inquiry. But there's something to be said when good and upstanding officials who are allegedly being harassed, victimized, and even assaulted when they're just trying to do the right thing. That's something to think about. I'm not sure whether we as citizens deserve to hear the kind of alleged rot and filth within municipalities such as Ekurhuleni. It's worth mulling on. The mind does boggle. But this is where I leave it for now. Until we meet again, it's for now goodbye. Thank you for watching.